Hey gang, welcome back to the channel. My name's Michael, aka the Para Investigator. Now today we're not necessarily doing a video together. Today we're going to be listening to a podcast. See, a few months ago, my buddy Nate Brislin and we had started talking about piecing together a podcast about different paranormal hoaxes that people have tried to fake. And in our first episode, we actually did an interview with a man named Steve Kulls. Now, Steve, he's the host of the SquatchDetective radio show. He's been a field investigator for Bigfoot-related phenomenon for many years, and most importantly, at least for our topic today, a few years ago, he would write a book called 50 Large, which details the account of the 2008 Bigfoot Body Hoax. For those of you who don't remember, back in 2008, there were two men, Rick Dyer and Matthew Whitten, who tried to pass off a gorilla costume as a legitimate Bigfoot body to the media. Now, they would get pretty intricate with this hoax. They would actually buy a freezer in order to stuff it in, and they would also fill the costume with bits and pieces of real dead animals in order to sell the bit. Now, Steve, he teamed up with a group called Searching for Bigfoot, which is helmed by a man named Tom Biscardi, in order to investigate these reports. And along his investigation, Steve would not only find that Rick and Matthew, they were trying to pass off a fake body, but his partner, Tom Biscardi, was actually trying to market off the hoax as well by selling off a fake Bigfoot autopsy video to the media. Now, Nate and we were really interested in hearing more about this story, so I actually reached out to Steve and asked if he would be interested in doing an interview. And you'll get to hear that interview right now. Button. Awesome. Cool. So I think we should get introductions out of the way first. This is our first episode of this. So to the audience, welcome, guys. This is the first episode of a brand new podcast. It is Fakes, Frauds, and Phonies, a showcase of history's greatest hoaxes. I'm half of the co-hosting team, Michael Walker. Nate?
Oh, to me, sorry.
Yeah, I'm pointing to you, man.
And I'm Nate Brislin.
And for our first episode today, we're actually joined by someone really integral to the Bigfoot hunting community, Steve Kulls. He is the host of the SquatchDetective radio show. He's been in the field for many, many years. He's also an author. He wrote the book 50 Large on his expose on the 2008 Bigfoot Body Hoax. So, Steve, welcome to the show, my man.
Hey, Michael. Hey, Nate. How are you guys doing today?
We are awesome.
That is awesome.
Thanks to the Zoom call, I'm just now able to see that you just have a framed picture of the Patterson Gimlin Bigfoot in your background. That's beautiful.
It's actually autographed by Bob Gimlin.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah.
I have one of those too. It's like behind all of this stuff.
Oh man, I am lacking. I'm so jealous. That's so cool. But so for those who aren't familiar with this topic, there was a pretty big Bigfoot hoax that took place in 2008. Rick Dyer and Matthew Whitten, they tried to sell off essentially a costume filled with practically roadkill as an actual Bigfoot body to the media. It was all over the news. Nate and we've been discussing this whole time, and it was like, well, it was like, and Up Inside Out, they're like, this is a core memory.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Like this immediately comes to mind when you think of like a pretty big hoax. And I actually reached out to Steve. He was pretty integral to busting this hoax. And the whole idea behind it actually goes a lot deeper than really probably a lot of people were able to even find out from the news. Yeah. So Steve, you were a member of the Searching for Bigfoot group with Tom Biscardi, right?
I was not really a member. I want to clarify that. Okay. I was a paid contractor to handle their forensic evidence from from basically 2007 to about April of 2008 when I left, because I was a non-employee contractor for them. I would accompany their expeditions, most of which the time Tom Biscardi was not on. The only time he would show up is if the media was going to be there, and then he'd fly in, and then it's as you can read from the book, it was there was a very sycophantic effect to him. It's like you have to roll out the red carpet when he shows up. He expects everybody to hand and foot weight on him, and not so much to me, because I didn't really take as much part of my French, but I didn't take as much bullshit from him as his employees, because I wouldn't. But he would be like, "Oh, Tommy, get my bags." He wouldn't carry his own luggage. I mean,
wow.
I mean, if you're going to be that much of a Karen, I don't know.
Yeah, that's
Karen
the thing. And
Karen wasn't even a term then.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And we'll probably come back and discuss this a little later on. But yeah, Biscardi and the whole Searching for Bigfoot team, they made a what's it called? A documentary about the hoax like the next year, I think. And like the first 20 minutes and the last 20 minutes are just them talking about how great Tom Biscardi is.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people forget that after the hoax broke, Tom disappeared for like 2 weeks. Didn't do his pot. He was sick. Right. Amazingly, he got sick the day after, the news broke nationally that it was a hoax. And then he came back to his podcast with this basically Thank Tom show. And he had all these people that were prearranged to call in and thank Tom for, getting to the bottom of this and for trying. It was pretty sickening.
Yeah. I don't want this. We're having like an antithesis of the documentary. We're just having the first 20 minutes being like us stomping on Tom Biscardi.
and rightfully so. As we'll break this out, we may focus a lot on Rick Dyer and Matt Whitten. At the end of my podcast, I could have the next week came back and bashed their whole story they had told us the week before, had it not been for Tom Biscardi. So Tom was really integral part into promoting this hoax, making it go worldwide. And, as we go down the whole storyline, you're going to see he was more integral than even say Rick Dyer did or Matt Whitten.
Right. So yeah, let's start off with him because the actual hoax was originally perpetrated by two men, Rick Dyer and Matthew Whitten. Let me see. One of them was a former corrections officer and another one was a police officer. Is that correct?
Yes. How long Rick Dyer was a corrections officer, I don't know. He spent most of his life as a used car salesman. Surprise.
Yeah, about right.
But Matt Whitten was an actual law enforcement officer, yes, for Clayton County Police Department.
Yeah, and they had their own sort of YouTube channel where they would talk about how they're the best Bigfoot trackers in the whole entire world. And this got started because they made a post on their YouTube channel talking about how they found a Bigfoot body, essentially. And this was a big stir up in the community, and they would eventually reach out to you to be on your show. Well, you voiced your opinion that you're like, I'm not too sure about it, and they challenged you. So let's take a second and talk about what led to them being on your show.
Okay, so let's break into it. About the end of June 2008. Now, mind you, I'm not with the Biscardi team, hanging out with them at all at this point in time. It's completely gone. 2008, they started making these, and we're the best Bigfoot trackers in the world videos. They didn't initially claim they had a body. They did that. They ran that for about maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and then they threw the body out there. So at that point, I challenged them. I said, you know what? I challenged them to come on the show. I said, you haven't got a body. I don't, and I was pretty firm about that. So they came on on my radio show at the time. Now we do a YouTube cast. And what had happened is they made some claims. One of them said they were being represented by a so-and-so attorney, which didn't make sense to me at that point, because if you're being represented by an attorney, where is he? You know, why is he not on the program with you guys? The other thing was he claimed that the National Enquirer had offered him X amount of dollars. So what ended up happening was, at some point in the podcast, they asked who Tom Biscardi was. Well, little did I know that they had actually tried reaching out to Tom Biscardi before even going on my show. So they'd already planned to get with Tom Biscardi. So, you know, me being who I am, I said, well, you know what? I can talk to him. You know, why not? Let's see what happens. And at that point in time, after the show, I talked with Biscardi. And actually the three of us have a call, and he's still making the same claims that this and that. So Dyer gets off the phone call. Biscardi and I have this conversation. Like, he goes, okay, well, I'm going to reach out to the attorney. Can you reach out to the National Enquirer and see if, so the next day, he had worked on the attorney, and I was waiting back to hear from National Enquirer when he called me and says, well, I talked to the attorney and he has no clue what Dyer's talking about. So I eventually got the National Enquirer press office that eventually actually led to me to a written statement that said, hey, we have no idea what this guy's talking about. We wouldn't have $1 million to offer, really. You know, we don't, you know, so we knew their story. So Scardy and I had another conversation. He goes, well, I'm going to call him up and give him a piece of my mind. And that was the last time anything honest, or the last conversation I had with Tom Biscardi, really, and Rick Dyer. I didn't speak to Rick Dyer till months after everything was done. So at that point, it may have been like the next day, and Biscardi calls me back and, Steve, I really think they have it. Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like going, okay. Because Biscardi really never lied to me per se. Would he exaggerate? Oh yeah. But, you know, but for him to say, I really think they have it, when he really doesn't, you know, okay, he really thinks he has it. Okay. And from that point on, I was kind of out of the picture until they picked up the body. And that's when I decided to get my carcass to Indiana, Eaton, Indiana, which is where the body was kept after they picked it up. And I got my butt on my own dime out to Eaton, Indiana, because Biscardi did not want me there, for obvious reasons. So that's the context. So I'll let you guys ask some more questions. And
well, hey, going in, do you have any questions so far, my man?
I was just going to ask what they were like as people.
So I have met, you know, all three, obviously. And when you put Biscardi into the Bigfoot world, he's sycophantic. He is narcissistic. But take him out of the Bigfoot world. Like, there was times when, you know, I was out waiting for connect to my flight. Like if we got in on a certain day and there was a flight that was connecting, you know, the next day or two or whatever, you know, he would hang out and be really a decent guy and talk about different aspects of it, you know, the old movies and the old music. And,
right.
You know, he said, oh, let's go. You know, we were staying in Desert Palm one time, and he's like, oh, come on, let's go to Palm Springs. They have this great, you know, little street thing on Thursday nights. It was really a wonderful time. But you start putting them into that Bigfoot world, and it's like twists them. It's like Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah.
Which underlying, I think that's the real him. You know, you just don't change like that. Rick Dyer, same thing. I mean, when you see Rick Dyer on video, it's a performance.
Right.
You know, he a lot of people don't know this. And the reason why I think Rick Dyer, it's a performance, is because Rick Dyer is a natural stutterer. He has a stutter. And when you get him off script, you know, every once in a while you'll hear that stutter. But you know, out of them, he's, you know, at least he appears to be a genuinely caring person. Now, let me predicate this. Matt Whitten always was the quiet one. But I'll tell you what, years later, I mean, I'm talking to 2012, I got a phone call from Matt Whitten, and he really felt bad about the whole thing. He was the only one really at that time to show any remorse. He said, you know, I was a law enforcement officer, and I'm in the process of going back to being a law enforcement officer. And, you know, I thought this was going to be a big joke and a lot of ha-has, but a lot of people were hurt and mad. And he goes, that wasn't something I expected, not something I wanted to do. And that's why really, you know, Matt Whitten was kind of like, he was like the mouthpiece in a lot of the videos.
Yeah.
But he really wasn't the guy calling shots. That was Rick Dyer. And then Tom Biscardi and Rick Dyer.
Right.
But getting back to, and that's why I think I set Matt in a different category than the other two. Because let's look at what a con is, you know, or a con man. Con doesn't stand for convict. Con stands for confidence.
Right.
And you don't gain a person's trust or, trust, or how should I say, or belief in integrity in somebody if they're a jerk to you.
Fair. Yeah.
Right. So that's why I would see this when he's with, I've seen Biscardi do this 1,000 times on the road, where he was with, you know, he'd be on the phone. Oh, yeah. Oh, really, really nice to a person on the phone. Get off the phone, turn around and make a derogatory comment about that person. You know, so it's like, you know, it wasn't him. You know, Dyer, kind of hard to read him sometimes. I think sometimes he wants to be a good guy. But he really gets off the path sometimes. And, you know, I'll tell you what, myself and another person, Nikki Cologne, who does a podcast, we had a long conversation with Dyer after he was on her show, and I made a surprise appearance to negate some of the things he was saying. We actually had a very decent conversation afterwards. And for the first time ever, I had said something to Rick, and he had begun to show remorse, because his comment was, you know, I never thought of it. You know, you're the first person to put it to me that way. And now that I think about it, I understand now. And believe it or not, that was like the last time anybody's heard from Rick Dyer about Bigfoot. Right. So maybe it did get to him. I don't know. Only time
when
will
was
tell.
that?
When was that?
Yeah,
that was probably about 7 or 8 months ago, a year ago.
Yeah, because I was doing some ladder research on him, and like a few, let me check my notes. I wrote it down
about a year ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and around 2016, he apparently he has tried to put off 2 more costumes as bodies since then. He would just have them stationed in like the back of a truck in Texas parking lots.
The second one went off pretty well too.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of people believing him, and you'd bring up, and that was in 2012, 2013. Like, folks, it's only been 5 years.
Right.
Come on, 4 or 5 years. Come on. What's, you know, people didn't understand. And of course, we live in that society type of thing. You know, especially with social media society, where I see hoaxes every day coming out that have been long debunked. And the people start arguing with you. Well, what do you mean it's been debunked? You know, so it can be a little frustrating at times.
So let's see. At some point between Biscardi finding out about the body and y'all traveling out there, he would actually travel out and meet with Whitten and Dyer, and he would actually have DNA tests done of it.
Well, he met with Dyer and Whitten on 2 dates. in the month of August leading up to would eventually would be Bigfoot Black Friday, which was the press conference. And then eventually I show up there. I'm in the air when that press conference goes on, but he goes down to Clayton County, Georgia, goes to the Days Inn there, whatever, Hampton or whatever hotel it was.
Yeah.
Meets with them, calls me up at 5 a.m. because it's 2:00 a.m. California time. Says, "Oh, can you write these contracts up?" And blah, 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 blah. Well, for years, and it's kind of funny, I didn't realize this until, I gotta say, last year when I was, or earlier this year when I was ramping up after the Dyer interview, I didn't realize that the contracts I wrote, he never used.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The contracts I had written, he never used. He had written some of that, but what ended up happening was that the actual contracts that were signed by everybody was actually done by his attorney out in California. So, no, people say, "Oh, didn't you write the contracts?" Well, apparently not, because I have copies of this contracts signed by both. The ones that I had that I thought were used were only signed by Thomas Carty. So another myth that he tries to, there were several angles he tried to play after the hoax. I was hoodwinked. I was set up by Kulls. He was set up by me. How was that possible? I mean, I didn't, it's very apparent. You listen to the podcast, you knew I didn't bring up Biscardi's name.
Right.
I didn't know that he had called Biscardi before. And then that story gets even better, how all of a sudden the evidence after the hoax starts to unravel.
Which does kind of bring a question up to my mind. This is a spur of the moment type thing. It's like, well, one, what would inspire Matt and Witten to get to like try and do this? Because like that's a pretty big con to get $50,000 for this, which is what they were offered. But also it's like, how does Tom Biscardi think he's gonna get away with it? Because it's like he's sending people out there to inspect it and make sure it's true. Like even if he
wasn't. No, he wasn't. No, never.
No. Okay.
Never. So as the buildup goes, he goes out, he gets supposedly the contract signed, tries to tell me that Rick Dyer's real name is Danny Dyer. And, it was like, this is getting really weird. And, meanwhile, Dyer supposedly is throwing this level of paranoia out there that, I heard the Chinese are after it and yada, yada, yada. Got everybody. So from what I gather, the team goes down there because, you know what, there was a couple of team members that went down there, JC Johnson and Leonard Dan. Who again were just
named, I might be thinking of I'm sorry, I think it was a guy named Schmalzback, but that was for the actual.
Yeah, Bob Schmalzback and Tommy Biscardi Jr. They were the only two real Searching for Bigfoot members that belonged to Searching for Bigfoot, that were part of the team that picked it up. They had met the investor. His name was Bill Lett, who actually fronted the $50,000. And there was a long thing. They show up at the house of a guy by the name of Franklin Peel, who is a convicted felon, which even makes it even worse, having Witten involved with this, being a police officer. At the time they show up, Franklin Peel, this convicted felon, actually has a firearm with him. So they're afraid, Schmalzback will say down the road that, we were in fear of our lives. We'll actually put that on their website. They weren't. The reason being is I have all their statements to the police department, because eventually I foiled the police reports, and not once did they even say that they were ever in fear of anything.
Yeah. So even in the documentary, they said that they were like surrounded by guys with like AK-47s.
Lies.
Right.
Lies. There was one guy there, Franklin Peel. If you read, and the funny thing is actually, I actually have the entire police report right here.
Oh, wow.
Oh man, that's big
rad.
file.
Well, the police report on its own was 89 pages.
Oh my God.
89 pages, had all their statements. And the police never asked me for a statement. And the only statement they ever got from Biscardi was a press release and said, this is what happened. Despite him spending the most time with Witten and Dyer. You know, there's a statement by Bill Lett. That's a couple of pages. There's a statement by Tommy Biscardi Jr., which is a couple of pages. There's a statement by Bob Schmalzbach, which is a couple of pages. What is very clear is that the way Searching for Bigfoot tried to set that up, or Tom Biscardi tried to set it up, is trying to control the narrative. But we'll get into more about how this thing ended with the police department in a little bit. So you're asking, how was this going to happen? Or
yeah, how did Tom think he could get away with this?
Well, I don't want to.
It doesn't seem like he thought about it much.
Oh, he did.
In like the long run.
No. This is a very. You see, everybody think, and this is Tom's greatest asset. Is he's a deep thinker. He plays the long game, and a lot of people don't realize that. And I'll get into a little bit more about his organization, why it's about the long game. It's not about what people think. So as the week starts to build up, getting closer to that Friday when I'm supposed to fly out, I get a phone call from Biscardi going, I got the guys coming out to film the autopsy of it. They were the same guys who did the Fox that did the alien autopsy. They did the alien autopsy. They showed the same producers are coming out to do that show. And they're going to film the autopsy when the scientists get there. But he never names the scientists. Thought that was kind of, what do you have coming? Well, I got some feelers out, blah, blah, blah. All right. So we keep proceeding. Get an email, I think Monday or Tuesday. Oh, we got the DNA. I sent you the results. And the email said it was a combination. It had DNA consistent with human and ape, not a possum, which it turned out to be. Right. So he sends out this bogus email. Doesn't only send it to me, he sends it to JC Johnson and a bunch of other researchers as well. So finally it comes down to Thursday night before I'm supposed to fly out. And I said, listen, I'm listening to the crew. I talked to the team. I talked to Biscardi Jr., who's kind of being tight-lipped about it. He says, oh yeah, we got it. It's still frozen. I'm going, wait a minute. It was supposed to be thawed out when you picked it up. It's still frozen. And that was a big flag to me. Like, okay, this is starting not to be a good thing, but I'm going to go there just to make sure, I needed to be there, make sure everything was on the straight now. So I call up Biscardi. And Biscardi makes the statement, hence the name of the book, 50 Large. He says, what? This is the real thing. I touched it. Same thing he was telling the news. I touched that thing. I felt it. I smelled it. Do you think I would drop 50 Large on a suit? Right. Well, yes, I do. Yes. So anyway, I get out to Indiana. The press conference happened. I get in there. I get picked up at the airport about 4 p.m. Eastern. I get, it's about an hour and a half drive to Eaton, Indiana, from what I can recall. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's on the other side of Muncie. I get out there and, I'm glad to see a familiar face, JC Johnson. I mean, I knew all the guys. So that night, everybody was, taking naps, and we decided that, these guys are all paranoid, supposedly they're, this is the talk that was going on. Everybody's armed. Everybody's got guns. So that's why that whole thing about being surrounded by guys with guns was bullshit to me, because these guys were packing their own heat.
Right. Like, they're not in real danger.
Right. JC Johnson was there, and, he carried, he had a sidearm. They had an AK-47 of their own. And they were like, well, yeah, we're taking watch because, these guys, according to Dyer Winton, they said, the Chinese may try to snatch it. Chinese government. So like, what? Oh yeah, there was helicopters flying out. Well, it was the airport traffic. You heard some helicopters flying over, so they get all paranoid about that too. And I'm going, okay. So Tom, everybody went to bed. Tommy and I stayed up and we were listening to Coast that night. And
Oh man.
Lauren Coleman was on, and they had this guy with the suit designer come on and say, well, that's my suit. Blah, blah. It looks like it's been altered, but it's my suit. I can tell. Yeah. And Tommy and I just looked at each other because Tommy is, his Biscardi's son's a straight shooter most of the time. Just remember blood is thicker than water.
Right.
So obviously he wasn't going to back anybody else but his dad up after the hoax. But that night he looked at me, like, oh shit, so eventually we nod off, and it must have been about 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I get poked. I feel somebody poking my shoulder, and I look up, and it's Tommy. He goes, "Come on, let's go in there and fucking find out if this thing is real." Pardon again, part of my friend.
Yeah.
So we get in there and we start chipping away at ice. And finally, Tommy gets his hand in there and yanks the hair out. Do you think you can tell if it's real? I go, give it to me. So he gives me the hair. We take it down. I pull out a magnifying glass and I look down, and it looks hollow.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, this is not real hair. This is a hollow plastic, whatever type of. So Java Bob gets up eventually. He gets Bob up, and, we're looking at, and actually Bob and I both at the same time. Well, you want to figure out if it's hair or plastic. Let's burn it.
Mm-hmm.
Because hair will burn, plastic will go do a little ball.
Right.
So it went shrunk into a little ball. It's plastic. Now I get a little piece of plastic in my hands. It's fake. So at that point, Bob calls Biscardi, who's like very calm about, okay, well, what we want to do is we want to put a salamander heater in there in the truck box there, the trailer. See if we can't heat it up so we can melt some of that ice and see what's going on underneath the ice. And that's what we did. But Biscardi very calmly, yep, go ahead. Not like, what do you mean it's fake? I just meant, nothing like that. Like, yeah, okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let's test it.
Yeah. Of course, we heat that sumbitch up so much that the insulation in the freezer began to melt.
Mm-hmm.
It was coming out. So we eventually get it out. It's kind of funny. You see this video all the time of this the scene of this hand pulling up that rubber foot.
Right.
That's actually my hand.
Oh wow.
That's actually my hand pulling that out. And I'm like, this is fake. It's a rubber foot. Boom. So he goes. So they call Biscardi back up. Now he's got, Java Bob's putting him on speaker because he does, he's thinking outside the box too, but to protect his own ass. So he's like, So he tells Biscardi, hey, it's not real. And well, he goes, all right, I'm going to go over to the hotel and talk to the guys very calmly. Not, here's this guy that has a flashpoint temper and he's awfully friggin' calm about things. And I'm, like I said, my background, I'm a forensic interviewer. I've watched people all my life. I mean, since 1988, that's what I do. I'm a people watcher by occupation.
Right.
And I've seen this guy close up that, something doesn't go, but he's really calm now. Why? Like, this is bizarre. Why is he so calm? So he now everybody's thinking at this point, in the storyline, well, isn't that, if he was in on this, isn't that what he expected to happen?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it was. And I'll tell you why, because an hour and a half later, we get a phone call back. And, or maybe it was the next day. It was a big, long pause. The next morning, we had a phone. Now it's Sunday morning. We had a phone call. And it was, all right, fellas, I talked to the boys and this is what we're going to do. But I need you all to, what we'll do is, what we're thinking of doing is this. We'll have Matt and Rick pick up the body and we'll say that all the public pressure was too much for them. and we won't talk about it again. We'll all sign NDAs and we won't talk about it. And I'm going to myself. So he goes around and he says, Tommy, is that okay with you? Well, Dad, you're the boss. Mm-hmm. Brian Mazzola, who was the videographer, is that okay with you? Well, Tom, whatever you say. He was a contractor too. So he's like, Now JC Johnson and Leonard Dan, who were there, they were off with Bill Lett getting our food for the day. So they went off to go grocery shopping because, you got a bunch of hungry people. Bob, what do you think? Well, and be very clear. Bob was like, well, I may not agree with it, Tom, but you're the boss. So I'll Steve, let me get back to you. I was fuming. And that's all I could utter out of my mouth. And then they're all sitting there talking. And all of a sudden they're like, where'd Steve go? And all of a sudden they heard me explode. I took a lawn chair and I launched it across the yard. Like, motherfucker. And like, Steve, what's the matter? I said, I am not fucking covering up a hoax with another fucking hoax. No. So they called back and told Tom, no, Steve is not going with it. And this was his reaction. Okay, great. Click. That was the last time I ever heard Tom Biscardi's voice.
Oh, wow.
Live. I remember as he was going around the room, he made a comment to just prior to about the thing. He says, even though this is a hoax, boys, there's still a lot of money we can make off of this thing as long as nobody goes cowboy. And I knew that was directed towards me.
Right.
Because he knew his guys would all gonna, oh, okay, Tom. Yeah, whatever you say, Tom. Leonard Dan and JC Johnson, they, I think he thought he would push them over. I don't think that would have happened. They were very quiet guys and very nice people, would never say a bad thing about anybody until they found out what happened. And privately to me, they're like, this is bad. We got to get out of here. And they eventually did. But I was furious. So that was that. And after that, there was some, the only time, you want to hear something funny? The only time I did hear Tom, besides that point, getting mad with his flashpoint temper, fine, whatever, was when we're, my only thing is I'm just trying to get, Bill Lett's money back. And the only time he ever flew off the handle is when he realized that Bob and I talked with the FBI about getting his money back. Because at that time we were proceeding like this was a really big scheme to defraud. Right. Not considering, and Biscardi went off the handle. And that's when I jumped in. I said, well, you did tell us this is before the whole NDA thing. This actually happened on Saturday. And you did tell us, Tom, that, you said we can do, we want to get his money back. We'll do whatever we need to do possible. You said, go ahead and do it. So that's what we did. And now you're sitting there yelling at us. But the FBI wouldn't handle something as small or minuscule of a dollar amount as $50,000.
Right.
They told us, well, we only handle things like fraudulently if it's like 250,000 and above. Okay, well, excuse me.
Yeah.
I didn't realize $50,000 was a mere pittance. But so that's, that's the story up to that point. Now, that Monday night, I do my podcast, and I told the world that I was the first one actually really to officially squeak out the world, aside from rumor by a couple other podcasts that had some inside track with me that I was talking about. But yep. And somebody asked me at that point, do I think Tom Biscardi was involved? And at that point, I had no evidence to say he was directly involved. Like, he did not knowingly. I'm now in high insight at this point, but I'm an investigator. So I had that suspicion. But I couldn't verbalize that. It's like any other crime. You don't name a suspect if you don't have any evidence. You don't name the suspect until you're ready to drop the hammer. I didn't. I had my suspicions. I'm like, how the hell could he have, is he that inept to that, or is it a case? And what I found out is the DNA result was actually ape, rather a human opossum, not human ape.
Hmm.
And that was the crack. And I go, okay, now I'm starting to see where he hoaxed the DNA results to all the people he was trying to drag into it with him. Now, so I started collecting all these little bits of information. And needless to say, there was a huge backlash because I didn't condemn Biscardi right away. So be it. That's, police departments, and major league investigations, they all take criticism before the final summation. So eventually what it led to be, and that was, it all ended in August. I want to say it was around the 18th. I don't even remember the dates. I mean, we're talking next year is 15 years.
Mhm.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is a 15-year-old hoax.
Yep. Their press conference had caught worldwide attention. So here it is, Monday. Tuesday, I began to, when I get out now, see, I did my podcast. I was still in the camp. That's the other thing too. How much can I really, I knew about the whole NDA bullshit. I knew about him trying to cover it up with a hoax. So I was, I had that on the tip of my tongue, but, I got Tommy Biscardi like 10 feet behind me. And I don't know if they were going to, grab my phone or because I was on the phone at that time. And, grab my phone and shut the whole thing down if I say anything derogatory. So I just was like, I don't think so at this point in time. And that was it. The show kind of ended right there.
But you hadn't signed anything, so.
Right.
Oh no,
Right?
no, absolutely
So-
not. No. In fact, I flat right, like, no, not going to happen.
Right.
So now Biscardi had to run in this other mode, like, oh shit, he's not playing along.
Mm.
Now I didn't know why, and that was the big question: is what was the end game to all of this? So eventually, Rick Dyer started making more podcasts back in like November, December, saying, "Well, I think Steve was part of it." Blah 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 blah, and I'm like, what?
The guy who exposed that you did it, you think
Right. So he's saying, well, finally, I was like right around Christmas time. I like, Rick, do me a favor. Let's talk. I want to know why you think I'm behind this. So the first thing we play this quick quid pro quo game. Now, this is one of the times where you can get Dyer being honest.
Mm.
And I'm like, Rick, why would you think I'm part of this? Because he was really pissed off at Biscardi because they, between the getting the police involved and then they had to get an attorney and they, Biscardi, he was claiming Biscardi was part of it. And, so he was pissed off that, hey, me and Matt admitted it. Tom hasn't admitted it. Kulls hasn't admitted it. Well, I got nothing to admit.
Mm.
He goes, well, why didn't you talk to us after we had talked to you, on your podcast? I said, well, Biscardi told me you guys were paranoid, which was the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, that son of a bitch. And he says, well, he said blah, 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 blah. And so he realized that Biscardi was trying to keep everybody apart to run this little scam. So we started playing the quid pro quo game. And one of the questions I asked him, I said, Rick, before we get any further, what was the end game to all this? Because I'm still stumped.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I'm curious about.
And he turns around and says, well, Tom supposedly was going to do this alien autopsy movie. He knew it was fake. He goes, the first thing he said to us was, I know what you got ain't real, but there's a way we can all make money out of this. And I go, that sounds just like Tom Biscardi.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So, in knowing him and so I'm like, son of a bitch. And then, because he said, well, something about making some kind of autopsy documentary. And then I realized, what did he say to me the week leading up to them picking the body up? I'm having these guys with Fox News come out that did the alien autopsy video, which we all know was fake after the fact. So that's what he was trying to do, was trying to set this Bigfoot autopsy video up. That's why he never had scientists coming. Right? It didn't matter if he got us all to sign NDAs and we all kept our mouths shut. He could have did this video and put it out there. We'd sign NDAs. That was the game plan. Make a quick couple of million, all done, or even $1 million.
That's crazy.
And that was the game, was to make this quick money. Boom, 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 boom. So that was the story behind it. That's why it wasn't with Dyer and Witten just started trying trolling. That was their thing. That was create a joke and troll. Then Biscardi came in and said, "Hey, let's make money out of this." So the boys, obviously, they wanted their advance. Right. You know, and Lord knows Dyer had his share of money problems at the time. I know that from looking at legal records. You know, and I'm a licensed private investigator, and you know, it took no, and I was back then, so it took no great feat for me to say, let me pull some records, see what his financial situation was. It wasn't pretty. So, you know, that is how that all rolled out. And to realize that, okay, so I eventually go down to Georgia and meet with Rick Dyer and Nat Witten very briefly. And like I said, Nat was very quiet. And, you know, we end up the next day, Rick says, I'm going to take you wherever you want to go. You just tell me where you want to go. He goes, okay, this is where we met. Took me to the hotel, the lobby where they had to sign all the contracts and met. Let's go to, I said, well, can you show me where you picked the body up? He takes me to the Franklin Peel residence. Sans Franklin Peel. He didn't even show his face, but there's where he picked it up. I remember seeing the video of the pickup. I mean, yep, this is the place right across from the Clayton County Police Department and courthouse. Right there. It's right across the parking lot. So that's where they actually exchanged the money, was the courthouse parking lot. So then I said, well, and then all of a sudden Dyer goes, hey, he goes, I don't have it, but do you want to go to the store and see if we get a copy of the receipt for the freezer? So he takes me to the store. He shows me the model on the floor. And he says, come on. So he talks to the customer service person right in front of me, right there. He says, I was here in August and I bought a freezer. Can I get a copy of my receipt? And sure enough, now because I'm old and gray, I'm forgetting times and dates, but there was the date. I think it was maybe August 8th is ringing a bell to me. But anyway, he bought the freezer the same night Biscardi flew in. It's a 124 cubic foot freezer. You can't freeze that freezer in the time it would take 3 or 4 days for it to freeze. So that's telling me, guess what? Biscardi knew it was in that freezer, because the next day they took pictures that night with the freezer. And if you looked at it, it looked like there was ice on top of it. And that's their original plan, was to try to put water in it and put some ice in it and see it. And it didn't work. And he goes, actually, it was Biscardi's idea to freeze it at the levels, freeze it a little bit at a time. And it was also Biscardi's idea to, blacken the face of the suit to make it look a little different. They spray painted the face. Yeah. And Dyer made a comment in the drive, and we tried getting the receipt there, but because it wasn't in Dyer's name, he said, actually, Biscardi bought the paint. So, right, Biscardi bought the paint. And this will lead to another side story a couple of years down the road, which is phenomenally indicative of Biscardi's guilt. So a couple of years down the road, Java Bob Schmalzbach wants to get on my podcast and says, I now believe that and the funny thing is my old co-host, Big G, was there, and he was part of all those conversations too. He goes, I now believe that, Tom Biscardi was involved in the Bigfoot Body Hoax, because he'd always been a defender of Biscardi. Obviously, you saw him on that crap of a video they put out there about the body hoax. And he says, I think he is. and he's talking about, well, he was acting strange and the way he was acting and all this other stuff. And he had, so that was like on a Monday or a Tuesday afternoon. Our show aired, I think at that time, either on Sundays or Mondays, one or the other. And he was going to be on the show the following week and talk about it. And, but during his questioning, he goes, so, just out of curiosity, you don't happen to have that receipt from the AutoZone where he bought the paint, do you? So I find out that 2 days later he's on a podcast with Biscardi, and then he comes on to my show and completely does a 180. Oh, I don't believe he was part of the hoax. And of course, my co-host, not only did I jump on him, but my co-host did too. Like, that's not what you said. Yeah. And then a couple of callers called in and put him in his place. And then he made the comment. I go, well, I want to talk to you about your truthfulness. And this guy, I got him right on the air. I was like, I said, Bob, you're saying you claim you're in fear of your lives. Oh, he goes, why? Were you there? We were in fear of our lives, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, that's funny because I got your statement here on the police report. It says nothing about being in fear of your lives. Dead silence. Yeah, that's what I thought. And I was like, goodbye, you're done. I don't want another liar on my show.
Yeah.
I disconnected him. And that's the first time I ever kicked anybody off my podcast.
Wow.
But yeah, but what it was that was, again, these are the games Biscardi would play. And it goes even more devious if you read the book, about even a personal relationship I had with somebody that I think may have been a plant. It was planted there by Biscardi to spy on what I was saying, what I was doing, stuff like
that. So, Steve, here at the tail end of the hoax, it was apparently this real big hullabaloo in the Bigfoot community when the body came out. And there was a lot of fear that once it was proven to be a hoax, it would ruin a lot of credibilities in that community. What have you seen? Well, what did you see in the Bigfoot community once this was all debunked, brought to the forefront and exposed?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. You know what? 15 years ago, I mean, let's think about this. That was 2008. And I believe it was 2009 or 2010, a show came out called Finding Bigfoot. Right? Did nothing. 2 months after the body hoax, my Monster Quest came out. It did nothing. It was over a knee-jerk reaction by a lot of people to think that, the bottom line is this: people who think it's a bunch of games and nonsense will continue to think it's a bunch of games and nonsense, no matter what you do. You want to hurt not the industry, but you want to hurt the research. Point at every stick structure out there in the woods and say it was Bigfoot. Point at a blurry picture saying this is evidence of Bigfoot cloaking. That's hurting research.
Or he's an alien.
Or an alien, or
interdimensional.
Those people are the best.
That's what's hurting research, is the people that are given the forefront that believe in, or sometimes even, how about the people that go out? We see Bigfoot every time we go out there, every time. And, but never come back with a scrap of evidence. Except, oh, look at that tree break. That was hurt. Or
I've talked with at least like 4 different people who've said they have Bigfoot on their properties that they interact with on a daily basis. And I'm just like, no. I don't believe you, because you don't have a single thing to back that up with.
That's what hurts real legitimate research, because it goes on every day and it goes on unchecked. When the community can have a hoax like this and actually perform a hip check to it, like people didn't know that Tuesday morning, was it Tuesday morning? Wednesday morning, Tuesday morning, I flew back home. And immediately, when I had a connecting flight, I actually met my co-host of my show at the time, Billy Willard, at the Baltimore airport. And we did a podcast on my layover. And we said, hey, this is what happened. Now that I'm out of that camp, I can tell you that Tom Scardy tried to cover this up with another hoax, basically trying to get us to say this and that and sign NDAs and all that.
Right.
So that kind of broke that. The next morning, Wednesday morning, I was on Fox News in the morning, and they said, hey, the guy who, busted the hoax, here's Steve Kulls. And it was kind of funny that was searching for Bigfoot's own undoing. That was Biscardi's own undoing, because he wanted somebody to come out with a statement, and it was me. And they want to all put him up there. He'll be the fall guy. It turned out to bite him in the ass.
Yeah.
So, so he puts me out there on whatever Sunday night or Sunday, or Monday, because, and it was kind of funny because at that point, after I said no to the NDA, all Biscardi requests came through Jabba Bob. They didn't come directly from Biscardi. He didn't want to talk to me. So they knew they were in a mad scramble. There goes his idea for the movie. And the funny thing is years later, like I said, in 2012, when I talked to Matt Winton, I asked him, I said, Matt, what was Biscardi's biggest mistake? He goes, biggest mistake in the whole thing? Letting you know where the body was, letting you know where that freezer was, because you you blew the whole thing up. You ruined our hoax.
Nice.
Do you have any pieces from the original suit or anything like that?
No.
Or you didn't have any fake fur or anything like that?
No, I didn't take anything from it. I literally, it was a very, how should I put it? It was very emotionally draining at that time.
That's understandable.
I was like, and the scary thing was I didn't really know where the hell I was. Now I know where I was, but back then I'm like, I think it's Eaton, Indiana. I got, somebody was going to pick me up. I'm like, let me, there's a piece of mail over here. And that's how I got the address, was because there was a piece of mail laying around, because Bill let used his garage there where the body was. Well, the body was outside the garage, but we were all stationed inside the garage, tables out, whatever. But in the back, he had a little desk, and that's the mail on the desk told me what the address was. I'm like, well, this is where I think I am. So yeah, it was, I didn't even know where I was. And there was rumors that, that the area was a Dillinger hideout. Of course, we knew Dillinger hung out in Indiana quite a bit, which was kind of interesting, but, and, there was a whole bunch of things going on, and, the emotional drain. I remember it was either Saturday or Sunday morning, I was like, I'm walking around, everybody's kind of mulling around, nothing to do now. We got a freaking, suit and a freezer with, it's all done with. And I see Tommy sitting by the creek, and he's like, got his like this. And I go, Tommy, what's the matter? He's upset. He goes, fucking, he was like, I hate my father right now. My son had to go to school, and they were making a big deal out of this. Now it was like a fucking idiot because of my fucking father's lies. Tommy denies saying that now. Like I said, blood is thicker than water. And eventually he got back in line, but at the moment he wasn't, me, I've got no skin in the game there with these guys. Each one of them did. I mean, Mazzola was getting paid big bucks too, or bucks anyway, to be their documentarian. JC and Leonard Dan, they weren't part of any of the conversations conveniently. Jabba Bob was a big shareholder of Searching for Bigfoot. He was their vice president. And there was a lot of other chicanery that went on with that company for many years. It really took, as the book has, the book also takes a little in-depth look at Searching for Bigfoot as an entity, which no longer technically exists. I guess they went public back in to Bigfoot Project Investments, I think back in 2015, 2016. And now they're, and that's not even a thing anymore. They got bought out by some promotion company. And are they back to being searching for Bigfoot again? I have no idea. You know, the corporate games and you know, the shell games and the moving around and stuff. You know, at the time in 2008, at the time of the Bigfoot Body Hoax, you know, searching for Bigfoot's chief financial officer was David Nielsen. And David Nielsen either is at the end of or is out now of a jail term for a Ponzi scheme.
Oh, God.
And when I looked at some of, because here's the thing, when I was out being the contractor, I would often go, hey, Bob, can I get your pictures? And I would, and on the pictures would be the spreadsheets of their income flows. And I could see them taking investment money and paying off other investors. What is that called? That's a Ponzi scheme.
Mm.
Right. And then I learned, if you think about it, even Bigfoot project investments from 2006, when Biscardi got a hold of searching for Bigfoot or started searching for Bigfoot, to this day, which is 16 years now, he took in 7 figures by my estimates. I know in a 2-year period, he took in 6 figures. So it must be by 7 figures by now. To put up museums. You know, oh, we're gonna have the Bigfoot Museum here or there. I'm gonna build up, but not one museum has ever opened. Not one. But he's yet taking all this investment money in for museums. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Why? See, searching for Bigfoot was never about setting up museums. It was never about actually searching for Bigfoot. That was kind of an ancillary thing. Oh, maybe we'll get some evidence we can say is evidence, like the hand of unknown origin, which is a bear paw.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. And we can get some of these replica casts, like the Bosberg replica and the hand, you know, the handprint replica and some of the Patterson Gimlin replicas. And oh yeah, we say we have an original Patterson Gimlin film. And oh yeah, we'll say that body that skeleton, that 9-foot skeleton we found on the Texas-Oklahoma border that we claim that we never took. We'll say we have that in our possession too. And build up this big looking company and try to schmooze people to invest money to open these museums. And that's the way that company operated for years. It was never about finding Bigfoot. It was never about the search. It wasn't even about hoaxing. It was about the hoaxing was secondary, you know, and us as Bigfooters, you know, a lot of the research community looked at it 2-dimensional. I was looking at the long game. The long game is to get money in for these museums, because all the stuff we find on while we're out and about, we can create some of these movies, kind of build our credibility, or think, you know, makes it look on paper they have credibility, right? To the average Joe Schmo, look at our company. We look for Bigfoot all the time. We have all these movies here. We have all this evidence. You know, we're going to open up all these museums. Joe Schmo, who doesn't know the Bigfoot world, that looks pretty enticing. Oh yeah, I want to get in on this. You know, it looks like an investment opportunity. And of course, the museum's never open. But to the real Bigfoot world, because we're looking, we know the intricacies of it. We're not thinking outside the box. The problem is we're too close to it to see the outside picture. Luckily, me being a private investigator, I've learned, I've worked investigations all the time. And I realized that you can't be in the middle of something to see the whole picture. You got to sometimes step back and look. That's why a lot of your lead investigators don't do a lot of the actual interviews or collect the evidence or any. You have people that do that. And then you look at stuff and go, okay, well, I think this is where this is going. And that's the reason why.
Right.
So I think that's possibly a good ending point for us today. Nate, do you got anything left you want to
I was
add?
just going to say if he had any like closing things about it, like overall to say.
Well, I always say this, in any instance, no matter what it is, just food for thought for the Bigfoot community is no matter, you know, stop. Everybody looks at the flash. And what I mean by the flash is, oh, look at this video. Look at this picture. Look at this. Listen to this audio. What's the story behind it? Look at the story first. Put that aside. Forget about that picture for a minute. Forget it even exists. Look at the story. Is there a story? If there's no story, there's no evidence. If there's a BS story behind it, then it's BS evidence, no matter how good it looks. Because we live in a time where just about anything can be faked or made to look real at a very cheap level now. So that's my advice to people out there, is to look at the stories. Do they psychologically make sense? You know, there was recently a case where a guy had posted some pictures of I call it the peeping Bigfoot, and the Bigfoot's looking in the window, and people like, oh wow, look at that. And they're forgetting, oh, you know, the guy has this story. I go, well, the story makes no sense.
Yeah.
He's got a video camera sitting next to him. Yeah, it just happens to pick it up. You know, what happened to the videotape? Oh, it got burned in a fire at his mom's house. Right. And, you know, he films it for 8 minutes. Then his wife comes in and screams, calls the sheriff's department, but never says what sheriff's department. So therefore, you can't get a report. And then what's the next thing you do? I go in my closet and I grab my gun. Well, why now do you feel, you've been taping it for 8 minutes. Why now do you feel the need to get a gun? You know, that would have been the first reaction. You know, I'm in fear. I'm going to grab a gun.
Right.
It's like the parent with the little kid. And I've seen this video. We showed, I'm like, is like, you know, there's this supposedly 10, 15, 20 feet away. There's a Bigfoot peeking around the corner of the tree. And the father's taping, going, oh, look at the Bigfoot. Look at the Bigfoot. You're not going to do that with a child. The first thing you know, get the hell of a child out of there. That's your first gut reaction. And this, I don't know what this is. It's a wild animal. It's got covered in hair. I'm getting my kid out of here.
Yeah.
So, you know, you got to look, does it make sense? That's why the story is more important than the evidence initially.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
Oh yeah, totally. Because a lot of these things, some of them, they do really fall apart if you take like more than like a 5-second look at it.
Why do you think the Patterson-Gimlin film has stood up over the years? It's not only because the film, but because of the story behind it. Right. The same thing with the Sierra Sounds. Not saying that either one is the real deal. You know, everybody is open to their own interpretation. I have my own feelings. And I'm positive about both of the items, but there are some things that somebody may throw some doubt and go, well, maybe. But look at the stories behind
track.
But the track history of the story behind the film and the audio are so good that you got to sit there and go, well, it all makes sense. So that's, as long as it makes sense, then you should be good. And so.
Alrighty. So guys, again, we had my good pal, Mr. Steve Kulls, on here. He was, if y'all want to look into more about the story of the 2008 Bigfoot hoax, he did write a book, 50 Large by Steve Kulls. It was a great read. It's like one of the deepest detective novels I've ever read.
Quite a complex story, right?
And Steve, I really should have looked this up. When and where can people watch your show?
Well, my show has been on hiatus because I do something called inventory schedules at my job. So, but we are coming back very shortly. Sunday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern, SquatchDetective.com, all one word, SquatchDetective.com. Or you can also get through it at my website at SquatchDetective.com. Has links to not only 50 Large, but my other 2 books, the Sasquatch Playbook and What Would Sasquatch Do?
All righty, awesome. Well, guys, thanks for Mr. Steve, thank you for joining me and Nate here today.
Pleasure's all mine, guys. Pleasure's all mine, guys. Please keep in touch.
All right, we will. And we'd love to have you back on here again if anything ever comes up. But thank you for joining us again. And guys, to those out there listening, thanks for joining on the show. We'll see you next time.